Welcome to another episode of My Soul Connection. I'm your host, Billy K. Cabert. If you've ever worked in a fast-paced corporate environment, especially in a leadership role, today's guest will likely feel very familiar. John Berkley spent much of his career at full speed, leading teams, scaling companies, and serving as CEO of Cast & Crew, one of the entertainment industry's top technology services firm. Before that, he held senior roles across a range of enterprise technology companies, building products and guiding organizations through periods of intense growth and change. After years of living in the high-pressure, always-on world of tech leadership and losing a connection to himself and to his family along the way, John found himself ready for a different kind of challenge, one that didn't require an 80-hour work week, but rather a slower, more thoughtful approach to life and leadership. Today, he mentors and advises young executives, helping them navigate the same complex pressures he once faced, while also exploring what it means to create a life with balance and presence, creativity, and joy. I'm grateful that John is here to share his story, not just about his success in business, but also about redefining what success means when you've lost touch with yourself in the process. His journey is an honest look at what it takes to slow down, reconnect, and lead from a more soulful place. I hope his story inspires you as it did me. Here's my conversation with John Berkley. So I'm really excited to dive into your story. I was telling my husband the other day about how I was having you on as a guest and why. And I said, I just think there's a lot of men between the ages of like 40 and 55 who are quietly suffering. I've talked to a lot of guys in the corporate world, a lot of men, my husband's age, he's in his early 50s, and he agreed. And so maybe they're, suffering in the form of their relationships, not feeling passionate about what they're doing for work anymore. Maybe they're, workaholics and feeling really burnt out and stressed out, or maybe they're just, making their way each day through life by self-medicating. But in any case, I hope that through this conversation, we can spark something in people to inspire them to kind of take a look at their lives and see if they want to deconstruct it in a way to build something that's, new and more meaningful for themselves. So,
yeah, no, that is right on and very well said. There's a lot of talk about, male suffering. That's kind of a hot topic right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that a lot of men experience is it's really hard to accept that you're suffering, or it's really hard to accept that things aren't going right. So you compartmentalize it. That's the human way. And then it really does take real work and real awareness to sort of say, hey, wait, I can do better. I can be happier. I can be better. So this is a really, really common topic right now. I'm spending a lot of my time working with mostly men who have been in similar situations to me, and the themes are so consistent. It helps to know that you're not alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hope we get to hear a little bit more about that kind of work that you're doing. So first, I just want to briefly tell the audience how we met, because I think it's kind of interesting. We were at a psychedelic retreat together a few months ago, something that I'll probably talk about in more detail another time. But we connected one morning, I think over breakfast, just kind of having a casual talk about our lives in the corporate world, our families at home, just kind of getting to know each other. And the more I talked to you, the more I felt like, gosh, we're really living parallel lives. We were both married with 2 teenage boys. I should say we are both married with 2 teenage boys. We're both coming from the corporate world. You were a former tech CEO, and myself as a medical sales consultant. And we both had experienced some pretty major marital problems as well, and have both rebounded too. But I really liked or I guess I should say, I really related to your very logical, pragmatic way of looking at the world, and the fact that you're a grinder just like me. You kind of grind through life. And when you told me that you had this realization, or as I like to call it, when you kind of get into your late 40s, early 50s, and you have this midlife awakening — I don't like the term midlife crisis, I like midlife awakening — that you left your very successful career as a tech CEO. And I was fascinated by this, but I was also, being totally honest, a little envious of your bold move. The fact that you left the corporate world behind at the height of your success. So I just really want to dig into your story and find out a little bit more about your upbringing, how you got into tech, how you climbed the corporate ladder and why, and ultimately why you decided to leave it all behind. And of course, any lessons that you learned along the way too. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd love to share this story. And also, just to preface it a little bit, it's really not about leaving the corporate world. In fact, I'm not even sure that I would say that I have left the corporate world. I may have more corporate stuff in me, but that's not the point. The point is that I was wrapped up in an identity and a way of living and being that was so rigid, and so based on a bunch of principles and values that I learned throughout my life and that were positively reinforced. And what I've been able to do in the last year is just to sort of like stop and be like, wait, hold on, I can do better. I can do better for myself. I can do better for my family. I can do better for my wife. I can do better for my friends. I can be better for any organization that I end up being a part of as well. So you will not get a message from me today that's sort of like, hey, if you're in the corporate world and you're not happy, it's time to like leave it all behind. Like everyone's different. Maybe that is the right thing for you.
Glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I feel that what's most important is sort of like the values and the sort of the drivers that you have and what makes you really tick, and also being open to the possibility in midlife to be able to like, wait, hold on, is this working for me anymore? So that's kind of the central theme. But let me just sort of run through the background a little bit. So, you know, I grew up, I would say that I had a sort of stereotypical happy childhood. I had, you know, very loving parents, a great family. My needs were sort of well taken care of. I never even stopped to think that there was anything that was going to catch up with me later. And of course, you don't think about that as a kid or a teenager. But even in my 20s, I was sort of like, I am on a great path. You know, everything is sort of working out. I was raised to be a doer. A lot of us are. And then we start raising ourselves to be a doer, you know, so it's about sort of accomplishment, success, the numbers, all those types of things. I was very driven by that. I didn't think I was, but I was. And I think that sort of, you know, I went to good schools. I did well in school. I had a lot of friends, sort of like, you know, I was checking all the boxes in what I thought was this sort of blueprint for a good life. And then I graduated college. This was, you know, in the early to mid 90s when the whole internet thing was taking off. I was really fascinated by it. I grew up on the East Coast. I went to school on the East Coast. And I basically hopped in a car and drove to San Francisco saying, I'm going to just figure this out. And I sort of found my way into tech, which is what I was trying to do, and did very well. And, you know, did some startups, did some bigger companies. You know, not everything went perfectly, but I felt like I was really moving my career in the direction that I wanted to. And I also felt, it's really interesting to think back of me and my sort of career in my 20s. I really did feel like I didn't use words like this in my 20s, but like my authentic self. I was having fun. Nothing felt like a burden. I had a good social life. I had a good work life. I worked hard. Like everything sort of just felt fine, you know, and I felt very natural, and I would probably use the word happy. And, you know, I met my now wife, who's been one of the most important additions to this journey for me. I'll talk about her a few times. We got married, early 30s, started having kids, and I just sort of kept grinding away. And I sort of felt like I was doing a good job, you know, like I'm still connected with my kids. I'm helping out with the babies, but I'm still working hard. I was financially rewarded for it, which made me feel really good. Like, okay, I'm setting up my family for success. This is wonderful. But then I kept getting kind of sucked in more and more. And then next thing you know, I'm traveling a lot. And then I'm being offered the big job, which made me feel so good about myself. But like, I never stopped to think about the implications of the big job, you know? So I moved up and I got promoted. You know, I eventually became a CEO, a senior executive for a while, and a CEO. And again, like this is all going according to plan. And then you know where this is going, you know, like, and then at a certain point, in my, I'd probably say late 40s, something started feeling off, but I just assumed it was, you know, like there's all sorts of things to blame it on. There was COVID at one point, you know, I blamed a lot of things on COVID, but even before that, I was just sort of like, anything that isn't going well is somebody else's fault. It was, you know, something at my company, something with my wife or my kids. But I was still so programmed to feel like I was doing life right because I was accomplishing all those values and principles that were so important to me and that were so drilled into me growing up. So I think it took me a long time of feeling like something wasn't right before I could really just stop. You know, it's like so many people say about their kind of reinvention or their journey is like at a certain point you have this moment where it's like, hold on, like everything I'm trying isn't working. All the tools that I feel have worked for me for so long aren't working anymore. And I don't know exactly what it was, but at a certain point I said, okay, I'm going to stop thinking this is somebody else's fault or some situation's fault or that kind of thing. And really just sort of focus on what I can do to get out of this bind I was in. And my wife, bless her, was really concerned about me and she was trying to help. And for the early parts of that, I was like, no, you don't need to get involved in this. I'm fine. I'm fine. The I'm fine words, which is used a lot in all the coverage right now of the male mental health crisis. Nothing that I'm saying is all just males, by the way.
No, by no means, but yeah.
But there's a lot of familiarity in the sort of like, I'm fine and I know how to do this. I never knew how to ask for help. I became sort of, rewinding for a little bit. I was diagnosed as type 1 diabetic when I was 9 years old. And the way I plowed through that was, I'm fine and I got this. From the age of 9, probably to the age of 45. Right. And I always say, like, this isn't going to bring me down. I'm not even going to let it get to me. I'm going to live a completely normal life. I never stopped to be like, oh, this is hard and I really need some help. Even hearing myself say those words right now gives me the chills a little bit because it was like difficult for me to go there,
I just want to jump in really quick and say, even though I'm a female, I relate to so much of what you said, being that and I've told you this one-on-one before and at our retreat, that I kind of grew up with like a lot of masculine energy. I was raised by a dad from Texas and I had a brother he's only less than 2 years older than me. And it was very like, tomboy kind of upbringing, and I'm going to be tough. My name's Billy Kay. So by nature, I just had this like, sense that I should just pull myself up by my bootstraps and fix everything on my own. And a lot of men, I think, feel that way too, where they'll just figure it out. They're there to solve a problem, fix a situation. They don't want help. They don't need help. And they close themselves off from emotions and from really like taking a look at what it's doing to them on the inside and how that's manifesting on the outside in terms of their relationships and everything else. And I did the same thing, though. I had the same kind of patterning where I just stuffed everything down. I too I got diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis back in I think I was like 29. I was really pretty young, and I was having major, joint pain in my hips and my back and all this stuff. And I was very athletic, and it was really getting me down. But I was like, I'm not going to let it get me down. I mean, when I say it was really getting me down, I was burying all that, though. I didn't want to face it. I was just like, nope, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. And that's how I dealt with everything for years until I couldn't anymore, until it kind of, a lot of that stuff started to surface because I just pushed too much down and thought I would deal with too much and not pay attention to the emotions. So it's,
100%. And when you told me that about yourself, that really resonated with me too. It's like we become these sort of machines doing whatever we think we're supposed to do for so much of our life, the first half of our life. And me being sort of bummed about a condition, and I think it's the same thing for you, it's like sort of like, that's just not part of the program. I'm not going to do that. I'm better than that. I'm bigger than that. I'm stronger than that kind of thing.
I'm going to overcome it, like overpower it, just kind of
totally
push through it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. At some point around that period of time in my late 40s, early 50s, where I started being like, wait, hold on, something isn't working. And I think it's because all of the tools that I used that made me feel successful or made me feel like I was accomplishing something were not the tools for this, and I kept trying them, it was like it's very similar to using a screwdriver instead of a hammer. It's just like, it just wasn't working. Nothing was working. And my wife started saying like, you seem angry, you seem distant, you seem like something is like bugging you inside. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm fine, So at a certain point, I just I feel like I hit a wall, and I was sort of like, this isn't working. I feel like my marriage isn't working. I feel like I'm losing touch with my kids. I feel like I'm losing touch with myself. Typically have been a very social person. I'm like, I don't even want to hang out with people anymore.
Mm.
And I think that was when I was like, okay, let go of this protective layer that you've built up that has served you very well. Let go of it. Try to let go of it. And at least try to get educated. And these are words that I think I was probably cynical about at first. Soften up and be okay with not being okay,
Right. Yeah.
Anybody who's listening to this, who's sort of like that the words that we're sharing are resonating with you, I encourage you to try to sit with those words for a while, to be okay with not being okay. It's like,
Yeah,
it's the first step to sort of wait, hold on. I can operate a little bit differently. I'm still going to be my own person. I'm still going to be the same person, but maybe I can do things differently. So I did have this awakening moment, or the beginning of a journey, probably around 50, I would say. I started seeing a therapist, which is something that a therapist for things that other people needed. I don't need therapists.
Right. Yep.
That's a sign of weakness. That's probably what I thought subconsciously.
And a second ago, I was going to say, when you were talking about being okay with not being okay, having that acceptance, I wonder too, as a man, is there a stigma around that where that makes you feel weak, or that makes you feel like you're not the man of the house anymore, or that you don't want to be somebody else's burden or problem? But it's just accepting and admitting that is sound cliche, but it's the first step, right?
100%. And I think that there's so many things about the social definition of masculinity that just doesn't work with that. And more recently, I've realized this has actually been a huge part of my last couple of years. Some of the sort of core masculine traits or attributes of, wanting to provide and protect, those are good. Those are fine. Actually, you can embrace those. And I think society's gotten a little bit wonky with that. But you can embrace that. But that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to have feelings, that you're always supposed to be fine, that you're being not okay is not okay. We conflate those things,
Yeah, I think it's that idea of it's not an either or black and white issue. It's you can have both. You can still be, some people might be offended by this phrase, but the man of the house. I mean, I'm not offended by it, but you can still have that, exert that masculine energy and be the protector, the provider, and be not okay. It's okay to do both. Or have both.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I would say during this sort of cyclone that I was in, late 40s, starting around the late 40s, I couldn't even, I was literally felt like I was in a cyclone. I couldn't even think about any of these things. I was just sort of stuck. Okay, I either have to be masculine or I have to be weak. It took a lot of work. It was probably a year and a half or 2 years of therapy, as well as other things. Billy Kate, you mentioned psychedelic retreat. I started dabbling in some of that as a way. And that actually I found really, really helpful, just as a mode of looking at things differently, which is more than anything else what I needed to do. I needed to sort of deprogram some aspects of myself that were either ingrained from society or my upbringing or myself, my identity, and start looking at things differently. And then I really started a turnaround. And no surprise, you kind of hinted at this earlier, that is also how your relationships can turn around. My wife and I had done couples therapy for a while before that. And I thought that's all we need to do, because this is the problem with the relationship.
Right.
And yes, there's plenty of problems with relationships, but I never stopped to realize, wait, hold on. What am I doing to create this dynamic? I didn't have the humility or the softness to feel that way,
Oh, neither did I. And I talked about it on one of my other interviews about the fact that I kind of blamed my husband for everything initially when we had our marital issues. And I just didn't want to look at myself. And I thought I was isolating the problem as a marital problem, as opposed to something that each of us individually were contributing to and had to work through on our own before we could have two healthy people come together and be attempting communication and the contribution to the marriage before you can have a healthy marriage. So it's, it's a sum of two parts, right?
100%. And I think that I was applying a lot of the same sort of tools that had been refined over the years to my marriage and to my home life and to my social life. I was trying to fix problems, I'm a very analytical person. A lot of people are. And I realized that I was trying to analyze the sort of specifics of what wasn't going right and being like, okay, when this happens, it triggers a chain reaction like this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at one point my wife being like, I don't think this is like a problem to be solved scientifically. I think we have to really kind of listen
Right.
to each other and stuff like that. And I thought she was crazy. I like, that's nonsense. Like, all life is a set of problems to be fixed, you know? So, um, so I would say the first year of my awakening process was me banging my head against a wall constantly because I was trying to use the screwdriver for a job that needed a hammer or something like that. You know, I was
Right.
just like applying wrong things. And I started realizing that I was feeling that this was all unfair. You know, like,
Mm.
I've worked hard, I've tried hard, I'm a good person. Like, this is unfair, you know? And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the same thing as blaming somebody, you know? Like,
Right.
you're not
It's a bit of a
listening to
victim
yourself.
mentality.
Totally. You're not
Yeah.
listening to yourself. You're not feeling what's going on. And I think a lot of people would tell you, sort of since then, having many more conversations about this, that like the beginning of your sort of healing, awakening journey is a hard one. You know, you're going to want to
Mm-hmm.
quit. Like
Oh, yeah.
running a marathon, you're going to want to quit in the beginning or maybe for the first half, you know?
Well, because it can be pretty overwhelming when you start to peel back the onion layers and you're like, it's like, shit, where do I start? You know,
Yes.
and it's very confronting too, very confronting.
Totally. Totally.
Did all of that for you though? Did what you're talking about that first year that was really hard and when you were trying to use the wrong tools, was that before you got into therapy or was that during therapy?
That was during therapy. So that was
During therapy.
like in
Okay.
my first chapters of
Gotcha.
self work.
Okay.
In retrospect, I knew none of this at the time. In retrospect, I wasn't able to see the situation I was in from any vantage point other than my prior self, the tools and the frameworks that were so strong in me. And I also was resentful that my family felt deprioritized
Mm,
because I was so proud of myself for so many years of like feeling like I had checked the like work-life balance box, you know, like anytime I could be home for dinner, I am. And anytime that I can go to a kid's game, I'm doing it. But like,
mm-hmm.
that wasn't the important point. That was me using almost like scientific methods to sort of like,
Right.
how am I doing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I
And it's like you're
wasn't,
there for those things, but you're not really there. You're like mentally
oh, totally.
or in
There
your
was
heart,
probably
you're not
so
really
much,
there.
yeah, there was probably so much distance and times I'm sort of checked out. And I was defensive about that. I'm like, that's not true. So when you finally crack open, which I think I got through after a year or so of work, and I certainly don't want to make it sound like this journey is successful and over, like we all stay in our journeys forever. So I think I got to a place where it's like, okay, I've cracked this protective shell. And I think I finally learned that these concepts that almost sound trite, like you can't love somebody if you don't love yourself. I remember waking up one day, I'm like, oh my God, that's true. You know, it's
Yeah,
like,
it's so
you
true.
hear that when you're in kindergarten and like, you
Yeah.
know, as like, so there's things like that that I really needed to sort of get to. I need to soften up. I needed to sort of know what it meant to feel. And it was like this in my household with my father. Like if somebody in my house is like, oh, I'm feeling really cold, my first response is to sort of like look at the thermostat and be like, it's 70 degrees in here. I don't know what your problem is. You know, it's like,
Right.
as opposed to just like, wait, no, they're just telling me they're uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what the temperature is in here. They're
Right.
looking for some support or so, you
Right.
know, something like that. And I just didn't know how to do that. I don't think I ever learned how to do that, you know?
Right.
So all of this just sort of opened me up to a softer way of thinking, a more heart-oriented way of thinking. And then that opened me up to the idea of how much performing, that's a word I use a lot inside my own head, how much performing I've done in my life. I was like what I was saying before about being diabetic. That was a performance. That was me trying to look strong and capable, you know,
Mm,
because I didn't
yeah.
want to break down and look weak or soft or anything like
Right.
that. And performance, anybody who's been in the corporate world, anyone who's, you know, certainly people who have been in big jobs too, it's like there's a lot of performance, you know? Like, it doesn't matter if you're in a bad mood before a meeting. You got to go in there and,
Put your
do
game
your
face
best.
on and yep.
Yeah, put your game face on, and no, I'm not criticizing that concept. Some of that is just the way the world works. But what I am criticizing and what I realized I was doing myself is getting lost in that performance where you don't even really know who you are anymore.
Right.
And it's easy to happen, and I see it all the time, and it really happened to me. And in my early 50s, I was able to be like, I was able to start saying to myself, okay, how much of my happiness, quote unquote, and success has been performance related? And I realized that a lot of it has. Now, if performing feels authentic, which I would say for a lot of my career, it did. I was excited to go into that meeting. If I had to put my game face on, I put it on and I really kept it on.
Right.
But what I never stopped to realize is how the lines get blurred between performance and your authentic life, and your feelings and your desires and your relationships and stuff like that. And so that absolutely happened to me, which is, I think, a very common situation. Does that resonate with you? Like,
Totally. Like, yeah, I mean, being on the sales end of things and not necessarily a leader. I mean, I was a leader in other smaller ways with groups and committees and things like that.
Leaders are salespeople first and foremost, so it's all the same.
True. Yeah, we're leading somebody down a path, right? But I felt like, and I, by the way, I also want to go back for a second and just say I also resonated with what you said about the early stages of my career. I felt the same way. Like I felt like I was in the exact right place and got into the right type of jobs. I've had a long career with the company I'm with. I've been there 23 years, and it has served me very well, and it's taught me a lot. So I have that same feeling as you about, it's not to demonize corporate America or that everybody needs to get out of corporate America. It's very much like, I think it really suited me for a long time. It worked well for me until it didn't. And when it finally came to a head, I started to feel the need to be performative. I felt less and less like I could be myself as an authentic individual in sales. Part of what I felt like my success had to do with was being myself and really being able to spend time with my clients and forge a relationship that actually really meant something to me, and that I really wanted to help them through some of the challenges they were having. And over time, as this happens long-term in corporate, at some point they want to squeeze the lemon as much as they can until there's no juice left. And there was a point at which there was no juice left for me. And I had to look deep inside of myself to find, how can I keep this job and reinvent myself as a salesperson, and try to figure out how I was going to continue on. And I'm still doing it today, by the way. And it's not like I'm here saying that I hate it or I want out, but I had to take a step back, pause, take some time to look at the real reason that I was doing it. And like you said, in the terms of performing, every time I turned around, I was getting rewarded for that performance. And that can be kind of addicting and become part of your identity and your ego too, which I'm sure you've experienced.
Oh yeah, no, that you just nailed it. I think I started feeling, just to use a psychology term, I started feeling out of integrity with myself. I'm like, this performance served me well. I was also, in high school and college, I was very social. I was a bit of life of the party kind of person, and that felt authentic to me. And then I started realizing in my 40s, like, that's not where I'm at. And same thing with work. I started catching myself feeling out of integrity, and again, it's like, I'm not dissing on any company or any sort of work situation or environment or anything like that. They're all different. They're all unique. They're all complicated. But like, it became just about like, wait, no, I have to get back to myself. I have to feel good about myself, and that will allow me to be much more present with my wife, much more present with my kids, and I'll stop performing the role of husband and father too, which is, because I think I was doing that, and I was starting to get really upset when the performances weren't going well. Like one really small example is like, if we had like a family outing and like the kids weren't getting along, or my wife and I were had a hard time deciding what we're going to do or something like that, I just felt like a failure. I was like, wait, the performance has failed. It's like a bad show, like,
Oh, interesting.
and as opposed to just sort of like softening, not taking it, not being defensive about it, not being angry about it, and just softening and being like, wait, okay, so we're having a rough day, it's that,
Yeah.
that's
Just
okay
accepting
too,
that. Yeah. For me, that was that was less of a performance issue and more of a control issue, because
oh
I
yeah,
started to
yeah,
realize that it's a control thing. Like, I have so many things mapped out, and if they don't quite go as planned, I did not handle it well. And I was the same way, where I'd get frustrated, angry, and quite honestly, pretty resentful. And my
yeah,
poor husband, the resentment was typically, going in his direction. And part of that softening is also learning to become less rigid in general, go with the flow a little bit more, just being okay with things not being okay in a moment or in a day, and knowing that it's not the end of the world. So I look at that as a lot of just kind of a controlling issue too, and maybe a little bit
oh
of
yeah.
perfectionism even.
Oh, for sure. I think they're all related. They're all cousins
Hmm.
of each other.
Yeah.
Perfectionism, control, performance. You're trying to create something that may or may not really be there,
Right.
and so it took a lot of time and a lot of just sort of deep humility to be like, okay, this isn't anyone else's fault. I am going to try to show up differently.
Hmm.
Around that time, it started feeling like being in the corporate world in such a outwardly facing situation wasn't good for me. And again, that's different than saying like, get the heck out of corporate or anything. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
I
Screw
was
you.
I felt like it was it was an obstacle on the journey I was on.
Right. Yeah.
And I was starting to feel the sense of outcomes, good outcomes from this sort of rethinking or reformulating how I go through the world. I broke down a lot of barriers with my wife. We started connecting much, much better. I started really seeing my kids differently again, because I was like more attuned to them. I was sort of like,
Hmm.
wasn't arguing with them when they said something I didn't agree with. I was like, oh, they're having a thing. They're having a feeling,
Right.
So that part was really rewarding when I turned the corner on that. And I was able to, again, soften up, open up. I started realizing how much negative chatter was in my subconscious for so
Mm.
long,
Oh,
like
yeah.
I was very critical of myself. I thought it was just sort of being success driven, but underneath it was this sort of voice in my head that's sort of telling me that I'm not quite there yet. I'm not doing this right. And so in a deep subconscious way, I was criticizing myself. And the way that would manifest is that I would start blaming others,
Oh, I had a long conversation with somebody about this recently, about the fact that the self-criticism that I had was just outwardly being projected onto others all the time. I was just very critical, had high expectations of others. When they didn't meet my expectations, they heard about it, or they felt it. Yeah, it's
Yes.
definitely a way to, it's a way that you can sabotage things, but it's also a lesson in that when they say in life, there's, everything that's happening in your environment is a mirror of what's going on inside. It's very true. And I think that you have illustrated that with your story about everything was good for a long time until it wasn't. And then once it wasn't, you started, blaming and being angry at everything around you, or, becoming a little bit of a victim. And at some point, it sounds like there was a realization that, wow, this is all internal. And that is the mirror image that I'm getting now. That's,
Yes. No, that's exactly right. And so
yeah.
I think the last thing I'll add to sort of just the sort of the arc of the journey was, at one point I was able to say, okay, here's things that I'm doing that are getting in my way of, feeling truly content or engaged or connected. But then I had to learn how to not be mad at myself for those things and to accept
Oh,
those parts of myself, which is a whole practice in and of itself, and be like, wait, hold on. Okay. I am a bit of perfectionist, and that can rear its head in some not great ways, but it can rear its head in some great ways. that I am a sort of analytical and a problem solver. And like, you know what? That's okay too. Just like be thoughtful and mindful of how you're using that skill or that tool, you know?
Right.
And so I think another thing that really started helping me, I talk about this a lot and it always sounds a little bit not that profound, but like I encourage people to think about this. I've tried to put myself on like a daily mindfulness practice,
Mm-hmm.
including really little things. Like I do not leave my laundry on the floor anymore. You know, I'm just like, I'm going to catch myself every single time I do that. I'm not perfect. I still do it sometimes, but I'm like, that's work, you know? And I do that not because the laundry is that big a deal. I do that
Right.
because I'm training myself to be self-aware about my ways, you know? And so I feel like that has helped me catch myself. I'm like, ooh, you're starting to be self-critical, or ooh, because again, we are who we are. Like, you're
Right.
not going to rid yourself of things. I'm
I,
like,
I
oh, and
have
now
to
I'm
I laugh about the laundry example though, because the, it's just funny. This is an example of why everybody and every situation is a little bit different. I was thinking as you were starting to tell the story about just being aware, and the practice of meditation was about being a witness, right? It's like being a witness to your thoughts. And so that's what
Mhm.
I've been trying to do over the years as well, is just witness when I'm being self-critical, or witness when I'm doing a certain thing that's kind of destructive. But the laundry thing, where I've had a tendency to be a little OCD, a little
Mhm.
overboard on the, just everything has to be neat and perfect. And my house is very tidy. And I, have two teenage boys. How practical is it? And I've actually had to do the opposite where, I
Totally.
still
Yeah.
always put my laundry away. I never have laundry on the floor, but my boys do. And I have had
Mhm.
to be intentional and very aware of just letting that go in those moments, and just, it's okay that there's socks on the floor. Nobody's going to die. It's like the exact opposite of you, but it's just because we have two different sort of issues we're battling with. So,
I'm so
or
glad you
maybe
said that, because
yeah,
it's like, yeah, I'm not recommending any one practice, and you're not
right.
recommending any one practice, but like the ability to stop and think of like, okay, what are my protective elements that aren't serving me anymore, you know? And in
Yes.
your case, it
Yeah.
could be perfectionism, OCD, over control. In my case, it was sort of self-criticism and hyper-analysis. And so what I wanted to do was put myself on a path that can help me be a witness. That's really it. And
Right.
meditation is something that I've hardly dabbled in, and I really, really should. But I know that for so many people who meditate, that's exactly the exercise, you know. And I'm thrilled to say I feel happier than I have since. I'll use the word happy there, because it just is
Mm-hmm.
a more of a gestalt feeling of like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing well, even when things aren't going well, because families are families and life is life and work is work and bad things happen. But I'm not dwelling and ruminating on like, what did I do that could have caused this, or who should I
Right.
blame, or any of that stuff, you know? So,
So would you say just in general, like the anger overall has kind of lifted, and just seeing things from a very different perspective than you were before?
I think that's exactly what it is. You know, my therapist used the term like, you seem to be on your own team now, you know?
I like that.
And that really illuminated it for me. So I'm like, that's right. I was always trying to solve something and get to a better place, as opposed to being like, just, okay, you're okay with yourself, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Fully
um,
accepting yourself. Well, so
yeah,
I'm curious, you went through quite a big journey that sounds like it started before you quit your job, when you were still working. So,
this was all gradual. Yeah, totally.
right. Was some of the bigger growth points in your life after you had just all the time once you left corporate, and you had some time to really sit back and ruminate in things and reflect in things? Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
for sure. I love the term spaciousness, like
Mhm.
mental and emotional spaciousness, because I think what can so easily happen, whether it's family, work, exercise, whatever it is that you can use to over occupy your psyche,
Mhm.
um, it's harder to do some of that work. It's not impossible at all. Um, but I'm now feel like I have the space to contemplate and listen to feelings. Like It's again, I'm amazed when I say listen to my feelings because that is something I've
Right.
never done before. I do think this space and time has really helped for me.
Mm-hmm.
I know plenty of people who've gotten through this while they are working full time and stuff like that. So I don't want to set up a false expectation or anything. But I think I have the time now to sort of just again slow down, be like, you know what, I'm going to take a walk and think about why I'm feeling the way I am this morning, you know? And so that's been easier to do without the constant stream of demands and attention that came from my work.
Right.
Even to a point there, like I I don't know if I'll go back and do something like I've done before. Maybe I will. I'm not thinking about that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wouldn't want to do it at all until I was feeling settled with this transformation that we're talking
Sure.
about.
No, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Well,
Yeah.
I think I can attest to going through this journey. I'm still working while still working, I was going to say, because
Yep.
the idea of spaciousness, I like that you brought that up, because there's a lot of different ways in your life that you can create space while you still have a job, right? There's
Mm.
creating better boundaries with people at work, especially I could imagine in a CEO role. That's kind of one of those things, you are always picking up calls and emails and text messages and stuff like that. Like, so maybe
Right.
setting up better boundaries, but also I've even done things like when I go out on a walk or a run or whatever I'm doing, like no podcast, no music, just let yourself be, let your thoughts run, and then maybe you come home and you take a minute to journal it or whatever. And maybe it's meditation in the mornings. I personally meditate every day, but I know that's not for everybody. But even just the things that you mentioned, like mindfulness, having a mindfulness practice. Mindfulness doesn't have to come from sitting in the lotus position and kumbaya every
Mhm.
morning, by your salt lamp. It can just be all the things that you mentioned about, picking up your laundry off the floor. But I think that people in general have it, and I'm certainly have been guilty of this myself, that we overconsume. There's so much information coming at us, not just through work, but through social media, through podcasts, through books, through TV. We have this tendency to want to check out and zone out on something instead, or consume more information that sort of clogs up our brains in a way, instead of creating the spaciousness that you're talking about. And I think
Yep.
people have become really uncomfortable with being in a place where it's just quiet and they don't have something to physically do or something to listen to, and I think that's part of spaciousness. So if you can prioritize just a little bit of time every day where you have that, even if it's just 15 minutes because you have such a busy job, that can be
Yeah.
really, really helpful, I think.
You're so right. That is hugely, and I did feel like I was able to get to, even when I was working, I felt like I was able to get to a better sort of like grounded place, I think is the
Hmm.
term I would use. Another thing that helped me, which may be helpful for others, is there's things around work, even in a hardcore corporate environment, that
Hmm.
can feel heart oriented. You can authentically check in with your team or your coworkers and talk about even about a work thing. How did this project feel for you, and stuff like that. And so I started working on that, which really helped with my sort of like, okay, I at least feel like I'm getting back to a place of authenticity because I'm not just this sort of like robotic, you know, um,
That's, yeah, great call out.
so yeah, it's something to really think about. And I don't think that comes with any cost at all. I don't think that means you're going to
Right.
perform less at work or you're going to sort of, your kind of more hardcore relationships with whether it's, customers or coworkers or partners or whatever, like that's going to degrade. I think that's also like a myth of masculinity too,
Hmm.
that I think applies to men and women in the workplace of like, stay hardcore,
Right.
and there, and there's people who talk about this. This is certainly not an original idea, but you really can do both. It just takes some work. And if you are
Yeah.
somebody who is wired like I am to sort of perform and achieve, it takes more work,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think, no, that's a good point. I remember when I mentioned a few minutes ago that I had started to lose myself in the job, and that I had to kind of reassess and reinvent myself a little bit. And part of that was like, what is it that's feeling like such a grind right now? What is it that's just making me not want to start my Monday morning and dread the work weeks? And I just sort of took inventory of it all. And I also took inventory of, why did I get in this job in the first place? What is
Uh-huh.
it that I feel I'm gifted at and that I really enjoy doing? And I really tried to make sure that I was balancing my days better to where I was spending more time like with my customers and stuff. For example, COVID was such a good and bad thing for our business. I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to this, where it changed our business in a lot of ways and the way we do business for the better. But it also, for me, it locked me up in my home office a lot more. And I'm a people person and I like being out with people. I'm not somebody who wants to sit on a computer and do spreadsheets all day. And so I think some of that really got to me over time. And once I started to realize, like, I need to get myself back out there and, interact face to face with people again, including my own coworkers, that really was one of those things that it's like really boosted my morale again after a while of feeling pretty down about it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, all those things that tap into like a deep sense of who you are,
right,
pay attention to them.
right. Well, I know we need to wrap soon, so I'm going to ask you two final questions I'm really curious about. One is, since this podcast is called My Soul Connection, what does living a soul connected life look for you now? I mean, we've talked a lot
Ye-
about kind of where you've come from and where you are now. How does it feel for you on a day-to-day basis to be connected to your soul?
That is the question. I
Right.
think you mentioned spirituality in the very beginning of this talk, and I didn't quite get into that. What I would say about that, because it goes right back to the soul connection concept, um, is I was anti-spiritual,
Mm,
like truly cynical about spirituality for most of my life. And I'm not even being specific about what types of spirituality, just kind of in general. And what I felt that sort of softening up and opening up allowed me to do is, again, just sort of see the whole universe and society through a very different lens that allows a sense of like wonder and mystery and not needing all the perfect answers, which was so hard for me. I'm somebody that
mm.
always needed perfect answers. One of my kids is like this too, and so it's very interesting for me to watch. And hopefully, I can save him
I was gonna
some
say
work
now
later.
you got to steer him on the right, get him on the right track, right?
um, but being open to things you can't crack, for me, is in many ways what spirituality is. And I'm not a religious person, but I've now feel in the last couple of years I've become a much more spiritual person, where I'm
Uh-huh.
which has opened up a great sort of new relationship between my wife and me, because she is a very spiritual person, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, like now I get it. You don't. It's okay that this is hard to explain. It's okay that there's something that you're feeling out there, and or even little things like, when my wife used to say, I'm getting a bad feeling about so and so, like family member,
Hmm.
friend, or something like that. I'd always be like, oh, that's just in your own head, and that's what I would think. And now
Right.
I'm like, you know what? You're onto something. I'm feeling
Yeah,
that
she's using
too.
her intuition, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, intuition is something that I had a really hard time grasping. And
Yeah.
so I think all these things, intuition, softening up, um, spirituality, are all part of this more whole self that I feel like I've been able to grasp since I kind of cracked down that protective layer, you know?
Right.
So what it means is living a soulful life means you're living it in the way that feels right to you, that you feel like you are able to be deeply connected to the people who you care about,
Mm-hmm.
um, that you don't need all the answers because that's exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
that you are okay with not being okay, all these things that we've talked about here. Um, is a gentler way to be on yourself, and I think a gentler way to be with other people.
Right.
Which, again, when the old way stops working for you, you got to find a new way, and I feel like
Yeah.
that is a big part of my new way. So.
Well, and that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on, because I knew that you came from this, you're a guy's guy. You were never very spiritual. I know you'd told me that at some time, and that you looked at a lot of these types of concepts as a weakness. And for me, getting out of my old self and into this new, embracing my feminine qualities, like getting more creative, not being all business all the time and so hardcore all the time, all of that stuff was really hard for me because I felt like I was going to be mocked or laughed at in society because so many people know me in that under that framework, right? I came into the business I'm in and it was a total good old boys club where I had to be tough enough to fit in or else, I was out. And I was so fearful of because there's so many men that like you, just totally anti-spiritual, that I would not be taken seriously. And now that I'm feeling so much better about my life and just my trajectory and doing things that feel so much more innately just totally me. I think people see that and it rubs off on people. And I'm part of what I want to do here is like bridge the gap for men too. Cause I understand that man's world. I really do, not having been around men my whole life, but also having that sort of masculine energy myself. And I really want to show them that there's actually good in having both, so I love that.
For sure. And authenticity kind of just always works. People feel it, they notice it feels better for you, it feels better for other people,
Yeah,
and
so true.
at a certain point, these defense mechanisms we have make you much less approachable to other people,
For sure.
So,
yeah.
So
John, what's next for you? What's in store for, let's say, your next, I don't know, short chapter, year or so?
So first, I needed a lot of decompressing to do and a lot of spacious time, like we were talking about.
Sure.
I am coaching mostly executives and CEOs, but
Cool.
some other people as well. I would say all around, like the right person for me to work with is somebody who is, sort of going through some of the same things that I went through, because I feel like I have some wisdom to share and some help I can provide. I have a soon to be senior in high school, and so again, that's sort of like staying really kind of present with my family for these next year or so is non-negotiable for me. As well as a couple other pursuits. I'm exercising every day, something I haven't done for a very, very long time. That's also part of my mindfulness work. And I've started a handful of different creative pursuits, which is also, I feel, really reinforcing of this sort of soulfulness, mindfulness. It's the other part of your brain, So I've been composing music, which is something I'm just super, super excited about. So those are all things that are sort of my extracurriculars that I'm not really willing to negotiate for now,
That's
and
awesome.
Maybe forever,
Yeah. And no reason to have to make decisions for the rest of your life right now, right? You're just in it where you are.
Totally. That's exactly right. And but I really love, coaching and mentoring, working with a couple of younger CEOs right now, which I'm finding just super, super fascinating. And again, so I was saying about one of my sons earlier, like I really want to be able to help people discover some things earlier than I did,
Yeah, absolutely. So it's probably pretty rewarding coaching a young CEO because you see the fire and the passion that they have for their careers that you once had. But you're also helping them mitigate some of the pitfalls that you can fall into. And I don't know about you, but I think that younger generation now, guys and gals that are in their late 20s and early 30s and really getting into the prime of their career, they're much more mindful of this stuff than we ever were. And I think it's just because it's way more, acceptable and talked about publicly. So it's probably nice to work with people who kind of want to hear this kind of feedback and go in this direction.
They're open to it. It's part of their vocabulary,
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Well, that's awesome. Well, if someone wants to pursue coaching with you, can they reach out to you by email or is there a website? How can they get connected to you?
Just email is the easiest.
Right.
I'm John, John at John Berkley, JohnBerkley.com.
Perfect.
Feel free to reach out to me and would love to talk. We've had so many sort of shared principles and shared experiences, and I love chatting with you about it.
Thank you so much for joining me for this powerful conversation with John Berkley. I hope it gave you something to reflect on, whether it's how we define success, how we navigate the pressure to perform, or how we reconnect with who we really are beneath the roles we play. John's story is such a powerful reminder that what some might call a midlife crisis can actually be a midlife awakening, an invitation to grow, to feel more deeply, and to live with greater intention. From masculinity and vulnerability to mental health, spirituality, and the quiet wisdom of our intuition, this episode touched on so many things we often keep below the surface, but that are so essential to living a more connected and meaningful life. If you're interested in coaching with John, be sure to review the show notes for the best way to connect with him. And please remember to share this episode with others who it might help, and be sure to follow the show, rate, and review it. Thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations, and until next time, keep connecting with your soul.